Coronavirus has been in the forefront of all of our week, and it's been not just in my consciousness, but in my prayer, my meditation this week. And there are many things I noticed that I've heard said that interested me as it relates not just to the coronavirus, but might teach us or remind us something about our faith. And first, I've heard, as I said before Mass, a lot of fear and anxiety, panic, as you have. And I felt a little myself, even kind of an unsettled feeling. I don't know what's coming. It's weird to see, fewer people, and I know the next couple weeks this place will probably be a little bit dead, But it's good for us to remember some words of Jesus, and they show up in a couple places. First of all, I'm sure you remember the story about Jairus, a synagogue official. He had come to Jesus to ask him to heal his daughter who was sick. And as they spoke together, someone came up and said, "No need to bother the teacher further, your daughter has died." And Jesus' response to that was to say, "Do not fear, only believe." And why are we so afraid? For obvious reasons. Anything that threatens our physical well-being is probably going to bring up some fear in us. And it also seems to me good for us to remember something that Matthew and Luke record. Jesus saying, "Do not fear those who can kill the body but not the soul. Fear only him who can send the soul into Gehenna." In this case, do not fear what can kill the body and not the soul, And we don't want to be like the Israelites. Massah and Meribah were words that reminded the Israelites, yes, of God's faithfulness, but mostly of their unfaithfulness. When they said, "Is the Lord in our midst or not?" So we have to remember that whatever's going on, the Lord is in our midst. In the collect, I added a little collect to this morning, and to remind us that we have a providential Father. We have a Father in heaven who cares about us and is leading us and guiding us, But I want to ask us this question, ask ourselves. We're so afraid of this virus. Are we as afraid of sin? And here's some parallels that occurred to me. So we've heard this phrase, a new phrase we learned this week, social distancing. And I don't hear anyone scoffing at that, Obviously, we're not all following that here today, but and no one scoffs at that, But I was remembering how many times I've heard people scoff at the old rule of the sisters. It was before me even, so some of you who are older, it might be in your lifetime, but it might be more my folks' experience. That when a boy and a girl are dancing, there should be so many inches between them, And we laugh at that and we think it's quaint. But it did occur to me this week that every time someone has confessed premarital sex, they've also said that they were alone with their boyfriend and girlfriend and there had been close physical contact leading up to it, So maybe a little social distancing wouldn't hurt us in certain cases, Or how about your friends? Do all of your friends lead you to God? All of your acquaintances? We don't always have a choice about acquaintances that we spend time with, but friends certainly. Or do they lead you away? I hear all the time, when I ask people, well, then why didn't you leave? Or why didn't you speak up? Well, I didn't want, we've been friends a long time and I didn't want them to be mad at me or didn't want them to. And I understand that on one level. But on the other level, any friend who would be angry with us for standing up for our morals or our boundaries or something, what kind of friend is that, And we usually talk about this in terms of teenagers, but it's not always teenagers. Sometimes our friends lead us in bad directions, Again, maybe a little social distancing from people who would lead us astray would not be a bad thing. I like this one because it was mostly the tone of voice I heard it said, Avoid the virus will make you sick. And the tone of voice was like, duh, avoid the virus will make you sick, okay? And everyone accepts this as wise advice from the medical professionals, and I'm sure it is, But it's interesting to me how little attention we pay to the religious professionals when they give us good advice, good advice. Avoid sin. It will lead you to hell, Or avoid the near occasion of sin. I remember when I first was ordained and I was first here, I didn't use that phrase. It was kind of an old-fashioned phrase, because I would use it for a while and people would look like, usually people who had been adults after Vatican II and usually probably a little bit liberal, would like, no one talks about near occasion of sin anymore. Someone said that to me, and finally I said, Stef, that's a good phrase. I mean, it's a true phrase. Use it, So I started using it again. But we should not scoff at the near occasion of sin. There are some things that we should avoid, because it leads us into sin. It will make us sick, I was thinking about Pius X and how the more liberal adult Catholics will laugh. Oh, yeah, his thing against modernism, his syllabus of errors, How stupid was all that? Modern ideas. He's just afraid of progressing, But a lot of the ideas that comprise modernism were not good for us. And they led the church in the wrong direction, Or think about John the 23rd with his encyclical Humanae Vitae and how he was just pilloried by many in the church for saying that artificial contraception is going to lead us in the wrong direction. We should avoid this. This is not a good thing. And if you've read Humanae Vitae, you realize all the things that he said contraception will lead us to have all come true, And so maybe it's time for us to think about that a little bit, Avoid certain things. They'll make you sick spiritually, State of emergency. Everyone applauds the governors and presidents and whatever for, and I'm sure it's a good idea. I'm not commenting on the idea. That we say, okay, state of emergency, we should do this, this, and this, and blah, blah, blah. And everybody thinks, all right, that guy's really on top of things. But how the comments I heard when John Paul II, you started talking about the culture of death. And in a way, he was just saying the same thing. We're in a critical moment here, and some things have to be done to make sure it doesn't get worse. That's what he meant by that. Or the Marian apparitions. Someone said to me, well, every time she shows up, she says the same things. Like we can stop listening to her because we know what she's going to say, And I'm thinking, well, then why aren't we listening? If she says the same thing every time she shows up, if she warns us, why aren't we heeding the warning? This is another one I liked. Wash your hands often. Good idea, But then some people were telling us how to wash our hands, And that's fine too, I've been doing some of that. I've been doing for a long time. When I wash my hands, I always say a Hail Mary. That's how I try to teach the kids to do it for 20 seconds or more. I pray a Hail Mary while I'm washing my hands, But now there's like, you got to do this and that, whatever. And that's completely fine. But I remember how people screamed at me when we changed the high school retreats. And in one meeting in particular I'm thinking of, but it was all over, and I just got hammered for a while. But the lady said, everybody knows how to pray. You don't have to teach people how to pray. But I've not heard anybody say, I know how to wash my hands. Don't talk to me about washing my hands. Yes, everybody knows how to wash their hands, but there's a particular way, if you notice, like doctors or whatever, my dentist, wash their hands in a particular way. We can be taught how to pray. There are particular ways to pray, techniques of prayer that will bring us more benefit than just driving down the road saying something to God as you're driving, which is fine. You go ahead and do that. But we can be taught how to pray. It may seem obvious to you that everybody knows how to pray. But some great spiritual masters over the centuries had developed some particular ways to pray that are very valuable. The other thing about washing your hands, that was the word often. Wash your hands often. You don't want those germs to stay on your hands. And I was thinking to myself, what great advice for sinners. Go to confession often. You don't want sins to just hang around with you, even small sins. I'm not saying you have to go to confession every day, but I still hear all the time, it's been a year since my last confession. It's been a couple years. No big deal, no big sins, just, I can't imagine anybody saying now, it's been 3 days or 4 days since I washed my hands last, like washing our hands 20 times a day now, Maybe going to confession more often, washing these sins away would be good for us. The more you know, the better off you will be. Seems reasonable, We've all been informing each other of what new thing we've learned about it, I get pretty regular updates from parishioners about, did you hear this? Did you read that? And I'm sure it's perfectly true. The more we know about this virus, and how it's spread, and et cetera, the better off we'll be. I've been saying that about our faith ever since I was ordained. And those of you who have been participating in the small faith groups know this is true. The more you've learned about your faith, the better off you are. The more you know about God, the better your relationship with God can be. The more you know about Satan, the better you can protect yourself from him, The better off our spiritual lives are, the more we know about our faith. And I want to be clear, I'm not making fun of anyone or belittling anyone. The coronavirus and the state of our health and certainly the health of our loved ones is serious business, But maybe we can learn something from this. St. Paul, you remember, says that he wrote that the athletes deny themselves all kinds of things so that they can win a temporary crown that will fade. He says, how much more should Christians run so as to win an eternal crown of glory? And so I guess I'm saying the same thing, If we care this much about this virus and about our physical health, which is fine, how much more should we care for our eternal souls? I want to end with just one last thing to encourage us, and here's my prayer, one of my prayers for us. As you know, crises or difficulties, whatever, can bring out the best in people, but it can also bring out the worst in people. We've had stories of the New York Attorney General is apparently charging some people for price gouging. Somebody's charging $80 for a bottle of hand sanitizer, taking advantage. Nancy Pelosi, in this bill that's supposed to help us fight the coronavirus, tried to sneak in funding for abortion. But it can bring out the best in us. President Trump declared today a day of prayer to call us to call on God to help each other spiritually. My prayer for us is that this difficulty we're experiencing right now, this challenge, this crisis, might bring out the best in all of us.